By this stage you should have created the interface for your Molemasher app, and all we have to do now is create the code. So I'm going to open up the blocks editor here, and I'm just going to take a moment to click on My Blocks and point out how each of the drawers in My Blocks, as we click on one of these, a drawer opens, they relate to each of the components in our designer's screen. Moving back to the blocks editor, the first piece of code I'm going to create is a variable. So I have to define a variable in the built-in blocks, and I'm going to define it as a number. Remember, I could also have clicked on the background and chosen math there and had a shortcut to the number there. I'm going to call this variable score, and I'm going to set it to 0 to start with. Looking at my algorithm, I'm going to create the code which moves the mole. Now to do this, I'm going to use a procedure. A procedure is a piece of code in a program that does a particular task, and it's, if you like, creating your own command within the App Inventor language. So going into the definitions drawer, drag out a toProcedure block, and I'm going to call this move mole. So this block will contain all the code needed to move the mole. Note that it's common to start a procedure with a capital letter, but to start a variable with a small letter. And what we want to do is set the mole's X coordinate. So going into My Blocks, Image Sprite Mole, and set the Image Sprite Mole X to a random place along the canvas. First of all, let's work out the size of the canvas. This is going to be the canvas width minus the width of the mole. But this would make it appear at the same place every time. So we're going to introduce an element of randomness. And App Inventor allows us to create a random fraction. So it's a random fraction of that amount. I'm going to do exactly the same for the Y coordinate. I'm going to cheat here, copy and paste, but instead of the canvas width and the image sprite mole width, it's going to be the canvas height minus the mole height. So this procedure is going to set the image sprite mole X coordinate to a random amount of the width, take away the width of the mole, and the Y coordinate to a random amount of the height of the canvas, take away the height of the mole. So it's going to appear at random whenever this procedure is called up. I'm going to add a comment here. I can also collapse a procedure, hiding the code within it if I need to make room on my screen. Next, we're going to create another procedure to update the score. So going into the built-in blocks, drag out another toProcedure block, and we'll call this update score. And every time we update the score, we're going to set our score label text, label score, set the label score text to the word score and then the value of the variable score. So to do this, we go into our text blocks and choose join. And I'm going to join a piece of text that says score. Join to this piece of text the value of the variable score. This is one of my definitions, and we have here a variable value block. This is the value of variable score. So I'm going to drag this into here. So this is going to set the label score's text to the word score followed by the value of the variable score. So it'll say score 5, score 6, and so on. I'm going to add a comment to this procedure. Now looking at my algorithm, I'm now going to add the code that deals with when the mole is touched. So going into image sprite mole in my blocks, when image sprite mole is touched, I need to increase the score. So going into my definitions, I'm going to set the score variable to what it was before, my definitions, the value of the score variable, plus 1. So this instruction adds 1 onto the score every time. Once that's been done, my program can call the update score procedure. So this is calling up or using the code in this procedure. We're then going to make the phone vibrate. So call sound mole hit vibrate, and then we have to say for how long. We'll say 100 milliseconds. Just a short vibration, a tenth of a second. I also want to play the sound for when the mole is hit. So in my blocks, call sound mole hit play, and once the mole's been touched, call up my procedure to move it again. We're now going to create the code for the start button so that when it's clicked, it sets the score variable to 0 and updates the score display. So in button start, when the button's clicked, the score variable which we defined earlier, set that to 0. And then update the score. Finally, we're going to use the clock component that we created earlier to move the mole every time the clock goes off. So under clock mole timer, when that goes off, move the mole. And that's all the code in our app. So to test your app, either fire up an emulator or live test on a phone.